wire directions should be treated very sacredly. Fill them out, as much information as you can put on those instructions. Please fill out those as accurately as possible. We verify all of our wire forms over the phone to make sure that person is who they say they are, and all the numbers and information match up. So it's very scary. You can't always pull it back. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. By the time it's discovered, the money's already been moved like 3 or 4 times and you can't do anything with it.
This is Michael Travis from the Waterfront Agent Podcast. We are here with Edward Berkman, the managing title attorney for Signature Escrow and Title, both licensed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, which I find interesting because the laws are completely different in the states, right?
So different.
So different. And you're bringing a lot of experience both in different states and different careers to what you're doing now. And so when you say oversee the firm's comprehensive title review process, does that mean that any title?
So we have title examiners here at Signature Escrow and Title, but the way I was trained how to do this and the way I do it still today is I look at every property that comes through our agency here. So any file that's open with us, any property that we're going to be involved in, I look at the title. Even if, we're not necessarily doing the closing, I still want to look at the title just to see if there's anything that I can find that might be an issue. So typically we'll have what I call a title abstract done. A title examiner will, dig into the history of the property, and then I go through again and I review and kind of do a quick search as well, just to make sure nothing was missed. Signature, we are a direct insurer, so we're not an agent for another title insurance company. We're direct, so we're able to save clients some money, but it also means if there's a title issue, we're the ones paying that. So, we have to make sure we do our due diligence to make sure that nothing is missed and the title is really clear.
Like, so from explaining to somebody, sometimes this is what I say. It's like when you get your car insurance, you're talking to Allstate or whatever, or maybe that's a bad example.
No, it's a good example.
You're dealing with a broker.
Yeah.
For Allstate. You get into an accident, you talk to the broker, but when it comes to the money part and settling and that kind of stuff, that might be some big company in the sky that actually does
exactly.
That. And so title work is different than the insurance part. It's my understanding that there's how many real title insurers out there, meaning there's Federated, there's American Title, there's Chicago, there's Fidelity National Title. There's a bunch of different ones out there. Okay.
There's way more agents or title companies that aren't actually insuring the property. They're just performing the settlement work, and they're issuing policies of which they're agents for a larger company.
Yeah. But they have to do their job right because they're still the first person that gets called.
Yes, but they're not the ones actually, if there was a claim, they're not the ones paying the claim out.
Right, but you're preparing the claim, just like your Allstate agent for your car.
Exactly.
It just has to be. And the difference is that with title insurance, it's for as long as you own the house, correct?
Correct. So there's 2 types. There's a lender's policy and an owner's policy. Lender's policies are going to be required to anybody who has a mortgage. And that's a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, government looked after mortgage. They're all going to require title insurance. That lender's policy, that's only good for the amount the loan is valued at. And as you pay off that loan, that, mortgage value decreases, as does that policy's sort of limit also decreases. An owner's policy is different. It kind of works backwards. It's a one-time fee. You pay it at closing, and it protects your title for as long as you own the property. And as your interest grows, so does the policy amount.
So if you refi, is it a whole new title policy?
Brand new title. Even if if we did the sale and then 2 years later somebody comes back and does a refi, it's a brand new file for us. we end up paying off the old loan. We, establish the new loan, and that new loan carries with it its brand new policy.
Is that even with a HELOC or a line of
Yeah.
credit?
So HELOC would be done at the time of closing. So
Right.
as you borrow money throughout that amount, like that, and yeah, with a HELOC, it's the same process basically. We review title in the beginning. As you pull from that HELOC, the amount of that policy would increase up to whatever the maximum amount of that HELOC is.
Okay.
And then, if, it's money you have to pay back. So once you pay it off, again, that policy would then be reduced.
So I have, I've seen, arguments and people not understanding at closings and whatnot. And I know title companies that will not do any title work unless they carry a title insurance policy with them.
Yeah.
Which makes sense to me because it doesn't change your responsibility. It's just now it's an owner's policy.
Yeah. So I recommend everybody get an owner's policy, but I encourage everybody to get what's known as an enhanced owner's policy. And that just gives a couple of extra endorsements. For instance, if you wanted to move your house into a living trust, you don't need to do anything. There's no extra steps needed for that if it's an enhanced policy. Typically, with a general owner's policy, you may need to add the trust as an additional insured, which you can fully do. There'll be no issues with doing that, but it's just the hassle of having that extra step to go do that. And all the endorsements.
So with an enhanced policy, let's just as an example, I buy it, it's under my name. 2 years later, I'm creating an LLC or a trust, living trust. Do I have to file new paperwork, or you guys just know it because it's...
So with an enhanced policy, I can't speak to the LLC part. LLC is like its own person, so that's a true conveyance. But for a living trust where you're the grantor of the trust and the trustee of the trust, and there's real ownership really changing hands, nothing needs to be done.
Oh, okay. So that's simple. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about cash transactions and, how that works certainly with your firm in terms of, I've seen discounts on doing the title work, but it doesn't change in terms of the importance of having it. Do you have a policy that you still will, if you're going to handle the closing? And just so people understand, in New Hampshire, we can talk about Massachusetts because I think it's completely different. So in New Hampshire, you write up a purchase and sale, and when all parties sign, it's now a contract. And then the title company is called, and they'll start engaging in doing a title search and liens and see if there's any sort of undischarged whatever. And then you guys do all the actual paperwork and the closing.
Yes.
How is that different in Massachusetts?
So in New Hampshire, all that stuff is done via title company. Open up the file, preparing all the paperwork, reaching out, getting your payoffs, to pay off the existing loans if there's anything like that. And that person is just a notary public that ends up signing the paperwork with the people at the closing table. Okay. In Mass, it's an attorney state. So an attorney needs to be going through all that paperwork and explaining to both sides really what they're signing and make sure that they know what they're doing. Oftentimes in a Mass transaction, there could be up to 3 different attorneys involved in this transaction. There'd be a buyer's attorney, a seller's attorney, and there's always going to be a what's known as a settlement attorney. Now, the settlement attorney may also be representing the mortgage lender. Oftentimes, the attorney representing the buyer can also represent the mortgage lender at the same time, because as a buyer, you choose the title company, you choose the closing agent for your mortgage loan. That's your right to do that. So there's really no conflict of interest there, but certainly an attorney couldn't end up representing both the buyer and the seller. Or the seller's attorney also shouldn't be representing the lender because that's for the buyer, really. And their interests are sort of aligned, which allows for that sort of dual representation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I could see how that's a conflict.
Yeah. So the attorney ends up doing it, and there's attorney fees that are involved usually. I mean, if an attorney's representing a seller, the purchase and sales those contracts themselves are, In New Hampshire, most of the time it's just that standard,
Yeah.
standard form that just comes from the realtor offices here in New Hampshire. In Massachusetts, the attorneys typically draft their own. And they're all kind of variations of the same REBA, the Real Estate Bar Association's
Mhm.
general contract. But every attorney that kind of gets in there and they make their own little changes and own little change it to how they like it. And then there's a bit of a negotiation. So typically in New Hampshire, you go right to purchase and sale. You sign that. It's basically with the offer almost. It's almost instantaneous. In Massachusetts, you'll send an offer sheet over. The attorneys get a hold of the offer sheet. They then argue over the purchase and sale contract for a couple of days. And when both sides are happy, everyone then signs it and goes from there. From a title perspective with a mass transaction, so typically, I will say this, like the contract is usually not signed in mass until after the home inspection, if there is one. And that could mean closings typically take a little bit longer to do, right? So those closing dates might be pushed out a little further back. We end up in a situation here in New Hampshire where everything, because the attorneys aren't needed, you go right to purchase and sale, you can end up closing a lot faster, which I think is everyone sort of appreciates.
So in a multiple offer situation, you've got a lot of attorneys writing up offers for different buyers.
Typically, the realtors handle the offers in both states. So, yeah, I mean, I will say realtors in New Hampshire, and please, any of my Mass realtors don't kill me for saying this. New Hampshire realtors, sorry, they just work harder. They do more. There's more to it. Now, I will say in Mass, there's some things like smoke detector certifications, Title V, septic, there's a couple extra hoops that those realtors need to jump through in Mass that they don't have to in New Hampshire. But, I mean, you're in the beginning stages, especially with the offers and writing those contracts, those New Hampshire agents are doing a lot more of that work. Whereas in Mass, the attorneys take that work over.
But I could see how there could be a whole bunch of conflicts. You got a house that's so popular, there's like 5 offers. How many attorneys can there possibly be that are writing up different offers for different people?
So again, the attorneys aren't usually writing the offers. So
okay.
The attorney doesn't really get involved until there's an agreement, really. Somebody wants to buy a house, somebody wants to sell it, and then the lawyers step in and kind of haggle over the details of it.
So my first transaction, divorce situation, they hadn't talked to each other in 3.5 years. The ex-wife is in Massachusetts and the husband is in the house here in New Hampshire. And the situation was that it didn't matter how much the house sold for, she was going to get this certain amount, which was way less than the value. But then, because he had actually sold the house to the next door neighbor, and then he had to unsell it because the attorney said, no, you have to use a real estate agent. And I just happened to get my license that day. So that was good. However, I then had to go down to the ex-wife and have, show the listing agreement and that kind of stuff. And I said, no, I had an offer. And I said, well, here's an offer. You have to go through it. And he goes, well, I want my attorney to look at it. And I was just new in the business. And I said, well, understand, I'm sure there's a lot of difference between a Massachusetts and a New Hampshire attorney. At the time, I don't know if you were doing, at the time you had 6 original signed copies for each purchase and sale on paper.
Okay.
We didn't have dot loop. We didn't have, stuff. So I took them down and it was a cash offer. So it was simple. And the attorney there took the signature page, which happened to have provisions, and he added a provision that was only good for the buyer. It wasn't advantageous whatsoever for the seller. Since he ripped off the original signature page, he then made 6 copies. So we no longer had original signatures.
Yeah.
And I said, you understand that this could void the contract. I mean,
Absolutely did.
and on top of it, I said, I don't know how much you're paying your attorney, but he just made it better for the buyer, not for you. This was my fast track into real estate. The other thing I will say is that I had the best mentor in the world, Kathy Youngs. You may know her. She's been in the business since 1967. So I learned from the best, so she can help guide me through that. In your business, why don't you go back and tell me a little bit how you started before you became a title person?
Yeah, so I went to, I'll say I was never a strong high school or college student, or I was a strong college student. I wasn't a strong high school student. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went to community college and I ended up just taking just criminal law classes thinking this will be fun at least. This is somewhat interesting to me. And I had a professor there.
That's okay.
Yeah. I had a professor there that said, "Oh, you should go to law school. I think you'd be a good lawyer." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I can do that." And I thought I'd be like more of a criminal prosecutor. And it was one thing that professor also said was, "Always do real estate because you can always do it on the side," she said. I was like, "Okay, that's interesting." So I ended up going to, so I graduated college with a criminal justice degree. I knew I wanted to go to law school. I ended up just finding a job that had tuition reimbursement. So I worked for a medical software company down the South Shore of Mass. I worked there for a long time, and I started going to the Mass School of Law at night. So I was kind of juggling both at the same time. And what they don't tell you is, when you're in law school, is especially when you're working as well, is I worked at that company for, at that point it was like 4 years. I'd been promoted. I had gotten raises. I was, making a good living. And when I got out of law school, the starting attorney jobs for those criminal prosecutor jobs were like a very significant pay cut. So I always thought like, oh, well, like maybe I'll just look into real estate. And there was a real estate firm that was kind of like right next to the building I was working in. So I applied there and they took me on. And it was great. It was a great experience. I loved learning the nuances of real estate law. I also had a great mentor. His name is Robert Bevins out of Tompkins and Bevins. They're out of Waltham. Really great. Taught me everything I know, really. And I still check in with him from time to time. Really sweet man. And I really liked it. And I won't say my professor was wrong. Real estate isn't easy and you can't really do it part-time. It's sort of been my primary focus for the last 10 years. But I mean, I would say it's not in a vacuum either. I've needed to become an expert in other ventures, and like including wills, trusts, estates, probate, like LLCs, corporations. So my practice has been able to sort of grow. I always refer to it as like the central hub of the wheel is real estate, and then all the spokes of the wheel are all the other things that touch it. And I've sort of needed to become an expert in those other areas. And I will say attorneys are like doctors, right? They specialize in one or two certain avenues, right? My specialties are real estate and estate planning and probate. And those all sort of connect quite, all the time. It's only more common for houses to be moved into trust as, we have such an aging population. So, and I will say one of my other mentors used to always say, real estate attorneys are always screwing up the estate planning side of things, and estate planning attorneys are always screwing up the real estate. So after I worked for Tompkins and Bevins, I went to a firm called DeRogers and Tierney, and they did virtually just estate planning. That was their real bread and butter. So I was able to learn from them, and they were doing very sophisticated planning. In Massachusetts, they have something called an estate tax that doesn't exist in New Hampshire, which is just the amount of money that you have to pay the government after you die. In Mass, there's a limit to it. I don't want to get into the details of it, but New Hampshire doesn't have that. So and then because they don't have that, that relates the real estate side of law, that trickles into that a little bit in terms of like affidavits for no divorce, affidavits for no estate tax, which are fairly common in real estate practice in Massachusetts, but virtually non-existent in New Hampshire. We'll still do that every once in a while when it seems appropriate, but that's treated more as like a case-by-case basis as opposed to the solid rule when those things are needed in Mass. So I really have the advantage of having two strong sort of backgrounds in two strong areas that couldn't be more related. And I kind of like the fact that I'm in sort of both worlds and I'm able to do both and do both really well and be successful at both. So it's really been a blessing for me to be able to sort of have that freedom and the knowledge so I can make good. I mean, I'm in the business of professional advice. So knowledge is like my greatest weapon. So when people come to me and ask me questions, I know I'm giving them good advice.
So my job is to be not the source, but the source of the source. Because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a, whatever, but I refer people. There's a lot of people who make a lot of money from referring that I refer. I don't make any money on it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But you said something interesting. Like, for instance, there's a tax after you die, a death tax in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's an estate tax.
An estate tax. So New Hampshire, so Massachusetts could never have live free or die as their theme, right?
Right. That's a good point. You can't. So,
but they can get their liquor cheaper here. So if they're going to have to celebrate,
cigarettes. Don't forget the cigarettes.
Well, I don't do either, but that's okay.
No, yeah. But
as a real estate agent, I could see you have a situation where a family member died and they want you to sell the property, and it would be important for a real estate agent in Massachusetts to know that's something that could come up.
Yeah.
And at my end, I've had situations where people said, hey, yeah, I was bequeathed all this money, so I'm going to buy, this huge house. But they knew nothing about capital gains or 1031s or something like that. So I just become the source of the source. I said, well, before you think you can buy this thing, you need to at least talk to somebody who knows about that.
Yeah, the tax, and I'm not a tax attorney, but I know my way around it enough where I can sort of guide people, around it. Taxes, just like we were talking about fraud earlier, taxes are also very scary. I'm scared to death of taxes. I've worked with clients that have had massive fees and penalties for not paying their full tax owed amount. And I've had to deal with the IRS in terms of trying to get things abated. The IRS is not a fun place to work, or not a fun organization to work with. It's very scary. So I always try to walk people around it in terms of, you're going to owe, if you sell this house, you're probably going to owe a tax on it. There's a couple things we could do to try to mitigate that, but I would be prepared to pay a tax on this, which is something that no one really ever wants to hear.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I'm not an attorney, but I believe that, when it comes to figuring out capital gains, there's a lot of deductions, like, for instance, the work that you do on the house, how much you pay. So from a real estate standpoint, I'm actually working on a listing that's coming up, and there are things that to sell a house you need to do. Like, for instance, if the roof is bad, you need to do that. But also, even though you won't get 100% return on investment from any renovation, right? People don't want to hear that. Something like a roof, it may be required to replace to sell it. Now, that's one step, because I didn't really think about this, but if you have a potential of capital gains, if you're going to negotiate a lower price because of the roof, it might be better to pay for it and deduct it with improvements.
Exactly. So
because I never really thought about that. I mean, that's just another way of looking at, the advantage of putting it together versus not.
And that's all improvements. I tell homeowners, keep track of everything you've done for that house. Paint, even something small, like having an electrician replace an outlet, or having an electrician put up a light. Like, keep those receipts. Like, keep track of all that stuff, because all that little stuff throughout, somebody owns a house for 20 years, all those little things can add up, and that could really be the difference between owing and not owing.
And it's a lot. Capital gains is like whatever, 30% or something like that.
About 30. It all depends how much money you made that year, but typically 30%.
Yeah. Very interesting. I'm all for improvements. And here's the other thing I think. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud about this. There's a lot of people who are saving money because they're doing the work themselves.
Yeah.
You can't bill
Which
yourself.
you can't bill yourself, but like
Materials you can,
those
maybe.
those trip to Home Depot, I guess, could save you a little bit. But I mean, I'm not a handy person. I wish I could. I wish there's a lot of things I could do around my house that I can't, but I end up having to pay the experts for. But again, I'm in the business of professional advice, so I appreciate professional advice in all aspects of it. I had a friend that came over the house not too long ago to look at a couple of trees that I was thinking about having cut down because I didn't want it to like fall on the house. And I'll take I'll take their word for it. He's the tree expert. I'm not a expert in that field at all. So I
I
truly
call
value professional advice.
trees
Yeah.
because you want them to fall.
Yeah. You want that? Yeah. Because that's an insurance claim, right? So,
Like, oh, look at that tree. It's about to fall over. Oh, I got to cut it. I said,
yeah.
well, maybe you want to wait. So it's
Yeah.
like,
That's another good. Again, I will say this. I'm an attorney. I have my own show in the Newburyport Public Access Station. I am an attorney. I'm not your attorney or anybody watching this as an attorney. So don't take any of this as legal advice. But, yeah, there could be advantageous avenues for not cutting down a tree, I guess I would say.
right. Exactly. Okay. So, and I think we talked a little bit about fraud. It's such a big thing. When
Yeah.
fraud started happening, I mean, for example, I'm at Verani.com and there are situations where somebody could come in and change my email, but instead of an I, they'd make it a lowercase l. So it will look like Michael.Travis at Verani, but the Verani part is an L, lowercase l, and put it in all caps, which is not how I do it. And then suddenly they're getting instructions to wire their money to usually a different country, and the closing happens and there's no money. What actually happens from it? I mean, what has happened when that started? It was like scary, and it's still scary because
Yeah.
you're talking could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. What actually happens in a situation like that? I
Well,
mean,
I will say it scares me, and I don't. A lot of times we're funding this money. It's again the home is usually person's biggest asset. So when they sell it
right.
or buy it, and they're either getting their life savings back to them that they put into the house, or they're giving up their life savings to sort of buy the house. The wire directions should be treated very sacredly. Fill them out as much information as you can put on those instructions. Please fill out those as accurately as possible. We verify all of our wire forms over the phone to make sure that person is who they say they are and all the numbers and information match up. So it's very scary. You can't always pull it back. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. A lot of times, it depends on when the fraud was discovered. There's not a lot of time after it's discovered. A lot of times it's too late. By the time it's discovered, the money's already been moved like 3 or 4 times and you can't do anything with it. I will say from your email example, though, it's gotten far more. What's the word I want to say? They're not just changing letters and emails. They're actually cloning the email and they're embedding
yes.
code in the text. So although it shows something, the actual text, the numbers and the ones and zeros behind the scenes are actually mean something completely different. We've had scammers, clone our email signature in an attempt to, defraud our customers. We take it super seriously. Everybody in this workspace, though, I would believe also treats it seriously, or they should, because it is very scary. I think we're all sort of on board. Title, lenders, attorneys, realtors, everyone's sort of on the front lines trying to fight this, and it is going to take all of us to do that, including the home buyer and the home seller. Always double check. If you get something that you think is shady, always call and ask or email and ask. I'd rather there's no stupid or silly questions when it comes to this. So that's sort of my PSA to everybody watching this is just please never feel like you're not going to bother somebody or you're going to seem stupid or foolish for checking or double checking this. Like always err on the side of caution with this stuff because it's really everywhere.
Oh, it's getting
Super,
worse. I mean,
super
I've had
scary.
8 this month. So you brought up something. My daughter, when she was 10, said to me, Well, Dad, the only dumb question is the one not asked. So now you know what my life has been like.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is true. And, and the scams that I've had are a lot of land scams with no mortgages. And, talking about, well, is that something that if there's a small lien on it, could that help deter these scammers? They're very good. I've gotten 2 land sale, I want to sell your land. They didn't own it. They sent, as an agent, I said, well, we need to see proof of, your driver's license. And they are sending perfect counterfeit. And title companies don't necessarily have, or towns, well, a title company would, but a town wouldn't have the phone number necessarily. There's a couple sources that I found to find actual phone numbers to people. And it's not always, up to date, but I would eventually find them and I would call them. But by doing so, probably telling them before anybody that their identity was breached. One guy, I called him up. I said, the good news is that, I'm going to be selling your land. The bad news is your land's not for sale.
Yeah.
He didn't know, but he didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I drove to it. I mean, the address on the tax cards, the first thing I do is check tax cards, was in Massachusetts. No, the previous address, but the driver's license was Massachusetts. It had his name, all that information. But his physical address where the tax bill is sent to was in Maine, but just over the border. So it was like a 25-minute, drive. And so I drove to his house. I go to his house. He's got "go away" on his front door. And this guy walks up with a pit bull and a big stick.
Oh, goodness.
And he sees my red car that says buy, sell on it, which, either means I sell drug stocks or real estate. I chose the least profitable. And I said, you don't know who I am, but somebody is trying to sell your land. And I showed him the driver's license. I said, I don't think this is you, is it? And he's cautious. He's being very cautious because this is someone who says go away on his front door, right?
Yeah.
And I said, look, I didn't have even I had my driver's license and I had, like a magazine that I was on or something. And I said, look, just talk to anybody in Wolfboro. They'll know who I am, because you don't know who I am, but I'm just telling you that somebody's trying to sell your land. This is what I got. This is an email. And so he then called his real estate attorney, who I know very well. He goes, oh yeah, that's Mike Travis. He's got a, Tesla with, whatever, buy, sell on his. And so, but I was able to immediately help him start the process. Now in New Hampshire, the registries now have a thing that you can sign up. If anybody does anything about looking up your deed, that you get notified as the owner right away.
Yeah, that's new.
That's called fraud.
Very
what is
new.
that called? Yeah, it's very
Fraud Watch, I think.
Fraud Watch. Yeah. Do they have something like that in Massachusetts as well?
Not that I'm aware of. They might. I know there's some like watchdog agencies that you can pay a subscription fee to that'll basically do like the same thing. Anytime someone searches your name, you'll kind of you'll know that. I mean, deed fraud, like they call it like home deed theft. I think it's not super common. It's common with land because a lot of land, they figured no one's paying attention to it, right? It's just someone owns land up there, upstate. It's not developed. No one's really paying attention to it. So things that aren't being looked after, like anything, like if you leave a wallet on a table in a public place, abandoned, it just looks abandoned, right? So someone might take it. So it, anytime there's a cash deal for land, I think just in general, my alarms go up, my red flags are up, even in a perfectly legitimate transaction. I'm already kind of looking at it askew. You add in something where there might be an owner that is not local, whether they're international or just a few states away. That's another red flag. So again, it's hard to combat. Like those licenses are getting really tricky. We've tried doing like FaceTimes or Zoom conferences to establish people's identity. But the problem with that I hear now is that the fraudsters now can use like AI or computer technology to mask their face on those programs.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
like it's just they're always a step ahead. So we're always playing catch up on it to some extent. But in
So
another
let's go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that's just another reason why everybody being vigilant on this is so important, and everybody being on the front lines of this is so important because we're already playing catch up. Like the fraudsters are already ahead of us, thinking up new schemes as we're speaking right now.
So, I had another situation where it was my buyer, my client, who was dealing with a wholesaler, which they have no, due diligence whatsoever. And he said, "Well, what do you think about these three lots?" And so it was at that point that I searched, only to find that the guy who owned it had already been defrauded, but he was about to put down $300,000 cash to buy these properties in 8 days, which was in itself, I thought, problematic. And even though he was told there would be like a title thing, insurance kind of thing, except that it's like not an owner's title. So it doesn't matter how much you put. If there was no like mortgage, there was no protection. But in that case, I helped him stop doing that. Now, the problem is, what happens in a situation that it, for whatever reason, actually went through, and then
So the fraudsters took the money.
yes, and the owner of the
So
property didn't really convey it because they didn't sell it. I mean,
so
there's
you'd have
fraud and all that stuff. Yeah.
so if they didn't sell it, so that means there's a deed with a signature that's a fraud,
Yes.
basically. So yeah, you'd have to go and you'd have to challenge that deed. You'd have to swear under oath that you did not in fact sign it. I'm lucky in my 10-year career, I've never had to experience somebody actually getting that far in the fraud scheme. So
Yeah.
I'll shoot you straight. I don't know exactly what would happen, but you would definitely need to fight that in court, and you'd need to basically contest the signing of that deed and say it was not a true conveyance. And if that is the case, then that gets reverts back to the previous owner. Now, the problem with that is the person buying that land that wasn't really for sale, they're going to be the victim of that crime, basically, because that money is gone at that point, I would imagine.
Yeah. And so the seller, who wasn't selling it anyway, it's like, well, I don't care what you spent, right? It's like, I didn't get paid and it wasn't for sale. So you don't own it.
Yeah.
Correct. And then in essence, they've just lost their whatever money and they don't own anything. And of course,
Yeah.
it gets
If
more
you had title
complicated if they start
insurance,
building. I mean, what if they
yeah.
start building? They could have a building on it, right? Yeah. Well, that's where it gets complicated. And
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And it would be so unique to that situation. Like what else was signed? Like how much due diligence is on the title company to prove that? And like, there's only so far that we could go, which is again another reason which is why you need title insurance. Why buying those? Again, the policies are real short money at closing. It's for a few, a few $100s, maybe a few $1,000s if you're buying a big property. To get that added protection, it's definitely worth it. And again, buying an enhanced policy is going to have all those little features that you might not think of that will come into play in these sort of instances. So definitely, I can't say it enough. Everybody should be getting title insurance when they buy a property, even if you have an attorney that's looked at the title and says you're good to go. Mistakes can't happen, and it's you want to make sure that you're protected.
Now, is enhanced policy a branded product for you, or is that a category?
I've always referred to it as an enhanced policy. I think that nomenclature is different probably from policy to policy. But when I say enhanced, it's sort of what I'm referring to as it covers more items, like moving your house into a living trust. As long as you're the owner of that trust, the grantor, and the trustee of the trust, there's no need to do anything else. You don't have to add an additional insured to the policy or anything like that. You're good to go. Everything's sort of covered. So every title insurance company has like their own version of what I would call an enhanced policy is. Your title agent should be giving you the option, or they're just giving you the advanced or the better policy, probably at a discounted rate maybe. But definitely ask if you're in the market for, buying a home. Or I will say this, I will check anybody who owns an existing property. If you want me to check to see if you have a title insurance policy, I'll do my best to look to see if we have it. It might be impossible to find if you don't have that paperwork, but I'd be willing to check for you for free.
So so that kind of brings up a scenario that may not even exist, which is, so you buy a house and you refuse the owner policy. 5 years later, it says, maybe I should have an owner's policy. Can you do that,
Yeah.
or is it too late?
Yeah. No, we can do that. Yeah,
Okay.
we can certainly do that. I mean, it'll cost more. It'll certainly
because
cost
you've got,
more.
like, let's say 5 years of owner policy not paid for, so you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we'd be charging you a fee to do like the title search and all the things that we have to do on our end to do our due diligence, even though there's not like a conveyance happening. But yeah, you could certainly buy a policy.
Okay. So that kind of brings, as a real estate agent.
I will say this, I've never sold a policy not at a closing.
Well, no, I'm just trying to think. I never even thought of this, which is like, you've got a seller, and there maybe there could be issues, except that the owner's if the seller is buying the seller's policy, it's based on previous to him, not while he's
not
there.
while you own it, correct?
Yeah. So the next buyer would have to get the policy to cover whatever's happening there.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Any stories of? I mean, I think we've already determined that what you do, your kids would never do, which is the same with my child. Taking my daughter around showings on a weekend, and you know what a weekend is. I don't.
I will say again, I like that non-conventional schedule. So I try I'll stop at people's open houses. I'd love to sponsor one of yours, Michael. Yeah, I could come and I can bring goodies and treats and kind of be there. And some agents like an attorney there, can answer sort of some legal questions. I just sort of hang out at the open house all day. So, I definitely, anytime I'm invited or I'm allowed to sort of crash an open house, I always take that opportunity. So I too am working the weekends, as they say. So it's not, real estate doesn't have traditional hours. It doesn't matter what your role is. If it's an attorney, a title agency, we're all sort of around the clock here. So
that's for sure. By the way, my whole criteria of my life is whatever I wanted to do was the criteria is I didn't want to be dealing with the same people every day. I didn't want to be behind a desk. I wanted to be able to use my creative brain, because I was in advertising before this, and so, and now in real estate, that's not the same side of the brain that most real estate is done. So I get to use both sides of my brain, all of my brain, hopefully. And then, I just didn't have this structured whatever. So, which can provide free time to do things like, I don't know, podcasts, but in the middle of the day. And so that is the appealing about it. But again, I'm not, I don't have a salary. I don't, this year might be worse than last year. Last year might have been better than any year. So, and in your business, the one statistic I heard is that there are more attorneys in the United States than the rest of the world combined.
Yeah, I buy that. We're a litigious nation, that's for sure. I mean, I think there's also, there's a lot of regulation, like we talked about in Mass. Like there's sometimes 3 attorneys for every deal. There's at least 2 in every transaction in Mass. Right. So, just think about that. There's a lot of attorneys out there, but like I say, they're specialists, or they should be specialists in 1 or 2 areas. Like, unless you get sort of up there in like the northern parts of the state, or like New Hampshire and Maine, or I would say even probably Western Mass, you probably have more what I would refer to as country attorneys, and they know a little about a lot, and they can kind of get you through a speeding ticket and a DUI at the same time, write your will and sell your house and sort of do everything all in between.
Which all of which could be related, by the way. So.
Yeah, this is true. So there are attorneys out there that do that, but I definitely think if you're in some sort of a metropolitan area, whether it's Concord, Manchester, Boston for sure. You know, there's enough attorneys that are specializing in those different things that, seek out, that true professional advice, like someone who really knows what they're talking about instead of just a sort of general practitioner. And I'll say this, I wanted to be a general practitioner when I was going through law school. I sort of liked the idea of, you know, knowing a little about a lot of things and sort of, setting up a shingle in a rural community and just sort of being that area's sort of go-to legal expert. And you sort
But
of
there's a
become
risk
like
to
the
that.
jack of all trades but master of none. And
No.
you really don't have any authority in really what you're really talking about. And I would say, as an attorney that's in two different states and that does, practices in, two to three strong areas, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of upkeep. Laws are always changing. And so needing to know the law in two different states and needing to know the law in multiple areas in multiple states, it's tough. I was thinking about getting my Maine license and I decided not to do it. It's like I'm not going to be able to keep the laws of three states straight in my head.
Yeah,
I
that's true. I mean, I last year I got a Maine license, commercial license, and a liquor license.
Oh wow.
Well, because I own a restaurant, so
Oh, what's the restaurant?
it's Mai Tai Bistros in Rochester. My wife
Okay.
is she's the Mai Tai. I'm just the untie.
Okay. I'll
It's
have to
very
check
good.
it out.
It's very good. But Maine, I went through the same thing. A Maine license is totally different than a New Hampshire license.
Yeah.
In fact, I took a broker's class with someone who had been in the business for at least 40 years, and she didn't pass the New Hampshire test, even though she was already a broker for 40 years. It was a broker's test at that time. And also, because she's also in Maine, you start mixing up the different rules. I mean, because it is totally different. It's totally different.
Yeah.
And I would think in law, it's the same thing, or title
Yeah.
work.
And the thing with the law is too, it's like the lawyers are held to such a strong standard where I can never say, oh well, I didn't know the law. I can never say that. I can never plead ignorance that I didn't know. Like it's my job to know, so I would need to know it. And if I couldn't do it well, I don't want to do it. So I don't know if
Okay.
I could. I don't know if I have the bandwidth for a third state. We'll see. Maybe things change, but right now I
Yeah.
don't see myself having that bandwidth. I will say I am. I have a large network of attorneys, so I am able to assist, and we do. Signature does main closings all the time, so we're
Yeah.
able to do that. But I rest on the shoulders of my attorney brethren that are attorneys in that state to get us through those transactions. So
Okay. Well, I think I learned a lot. As you said, you can't learn by sitting and doing nothing.
exactly.
And I learned from every part of the transaction. Every transaction is new and all the title work is new. There's all kinds of aspects in this business that we all have to run into. And so I really appreciate you coming here. It was very informative.
Thank you. This
And
has been fun.
so you've mentioned just in parting, you had mentioned you are part of is it a radio station or what is it that you?
Yeah, so I host my own. I live in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and the public access television station, the Newburyport Media Hub, I host a show called The Common Law where we break down like everyday legal issues. That's sort of the tagline of it. It's on YouTube as well. So if you search The
Okay.
Common Law Newburyport Media Hub, you'll find me. I have about, I only do it every so often. It started off once a month and now it's sort of as often as I can. But yeah, we just, I usually like to have a guest and break down a legal issue or just try to inform people on, different areas. Like we've done episodes on estate taxes and sort of the importance of title insurance for sure, and the buy sell process, and just pitfalls that people might, you know, they might try to avoid in the future. Things that I can maybe help guide people. Again, anything you hear from this program or my program online, it's not, considered legal advice. So
Uh,
just purely informational and entertainment value purposes here. So,
and I say the same thing about me. So,
yeah,
well,
there
thank
you
you
go.
very much. I love Newburyport, by
Thank
the
you,
way.
Michael.
You
Oh
know,
yeah, it's great. That's a lot of
well, I
fun.
lived in Boston and then here, so it's like that's in between.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
okay. Well, thank you. Have a good day.
All right.
Bye
Thanks,
now.
Michael.
Take
Bye.
care. Thanks for tuning in to the Waterfront Agent Podcast. I'll be back with some more stories, tips, and expert interviews, and hopefully some humor. So make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.